Okay, chapter 17 is the ectothermic. We're going to learn what ectothermic means in this chapter. And we're going to be talking about the vertebrates. And we'll show you where that kind of fits in the classification of all the different animals that we've been covering. It is still part of zoology. We're still studying animals. We've already covered plants, but now we're in the section where we're covering different groups of animals. The first one, we're going to cover some characteristics, and they talk about chordates. And chordates, in a moment, we'll show you where that kind of fits in the classification thing. This animal down the bottom here is called an amphioxus. And the reason why we show that one, because it has some of the characteristics that we find true of chordates. So if it's a chordate, an animal that belongs to the chordates or chordata, it has a kind of like a cartilage-like rod that runs the full length of it to give it support. So in other words, it's not floppy or anything like that. It would serve the same purpose as maybe like our backbone would serve for us. Okay. It also has a tubular nerve cord that runs along the dorsal, the top side of it. So it has a nerve cord that runs from end to end. We have a nerve cord that runs kind of from end to end of our head and torso. Right? Yes, we have nerves that go down into our appendages, but the main part of the body. So we have something similar to that. This next one is, they call them pharyngeal pouches. Is some of these you only see while the animal is, from the time that the egg was fertilized until it becomes ready to hatch out or be born. There is one of the, at some points along its development, it will look like that. You look like that at some point. Now, it doesn't look anything like you, but they have, the one thing that they're pointing out is they have these little pouches that's pretty common for all of the animals that are in Chordata. The evolutionists quickly ran with that thing, saying that that one of the things that living things do to kind of is, as they're developing, they appear to be going through the different phyla, from the simplest to the most complex, that they're going through all the different phyla, showing they're looking like the different phyla that they had come up with in their classification system. And they used a phrase, I remember when I was in college, it's a lot of big words. It's ontogeny recapitulates phylogeny. Okay? Ontogeny is like the descendants of an organism. Recapitulates is like recaps, shows the high points of all the different phyla. That's the phylogeny of all the different phyla. Okay? Now, I have not heard that more recently, so I don't know, but I haven't taught biology for a while either. There's long periods of time where I didn't, so I don't know if they still use that terminology. But there were those pharyngeal pouches was one of the things that they were focusing on. Okay, now that amphioxus does have gill slits, sort of like maybe like a shark, except it has many of these slits that go down like halfway down the side of the body. But that's how it gets its oxygen through, or for respiration. Okay, so where does Chordata fit? Okay, so we have the kingdom, animal kingdom, or kingdom Animalia, and then we have the phylum. Okay, so they belong to the phylum Chordata, and then remember with phylum, we could actually break them sometimes down into subphyla. So here are the subphyla that we could have underneath that. We have the Urochordata, which we're not going to study. We have another one that's called Cephalochordata. Cephalo means head. Chordata, and then we're going to have the Vertebrata. That's the one that we're going to study. Okay? And that's the biggest group, so that's the reason why we're going to study just part of that. So, Chordata, we gave you the characteristics of living things that are in that. Now we're going to focus on this one and talk more about the characteristics of just that smaller group. Yes, it still has all the characteristics of Chordata, but we're not going to talk about these. Okay, so we have the kingdom Animalia, phylum Chordata, and then the subphylum Vertebrata. Now, within the subphylum Vertebrata, we can group the animals into two groups as to whether or not they can maintain a body temperature or not. We have the cold-blooded animals, and what does it mean if an animal is cold-blooded? What does it mean to be cold-blooded? Okay, they do not produce their own body heat. So their temperature is determined by what? Yeah, their surrounding environment, the conditions that they happen to be in. If it's 40 degrees outside, their body temperature is 40 degrees. If it's 80 degrees outside, their body temperature is 80 degrees. Now, many of those same animals have learned how to increase their body temperature by going places where it is hotter. So, for instance, you'll often find these animals maybe crawling up on top of a rock in the early mornings when the sun's shining on the rock, making it warm, climb up on top there and warm up. Because the higher the body temperature, the faster they can react and respond. Okay, so life activity goes at a faster rate. Like for instance, if you find like a rattlesnake and it's close to freezing outside, probably not much of a threat. But if you find them when it's like 80 or 90 degrees outside, they're going to be quite active and you need to be more cautious. Okay, so now warm-blooded means they can produce their own body heat. Give me an example of an animal that can produce its own, or a living thing, I'll use that word generally, living thing that can produce its own body heat. Us humans, right? We can maintain a body temperature, internal body temperature that's pretty constant, even if it's down to freezing outside, or even if it's over 100 degrees. We can still maintain pretty much a constant internal body temperature. Now, the words that we use in this in science for cold-blooded, they don't use that word. They call them ectotherms. Ecto means outside. Okay, so the outside environment, the outside conditions determine what temperature they're going to be. Have you ever noticed a fly in fall when it's been really cold outside? What happens if you bring your finger up to them? Maybe do nothing, or they might just slowly move if you nudge them a little bit. All the chemical reactions, for body activity is going to happen real slow. You'd probably put your finger up and touched them before their brain even went fast enough to figure out, there's somebody there. Now, when it's nice and warm outside, you're not going to catch a fly you can't kill a fly by just putting your finger on top of it unless it's about to die anyway. Okay? Now, endothermic means we generate our body heat from within. And your internal core temperature, your body will try to keep pretty constant. If your body temperature ever rises above normal, then what do you typically do? What does your body do? What are some symptoms of somebody who's warm? The first sign usually is their skin starts getting more pink, right? The kind of a flushed look, we say. And if that progresses a little bit farther, then we start to see a little glowing on their skin, right? They're starting to perspire. Guys, what is it? Guys sweat, but girls perspire, right? And that's the way our body is, God created our body to maintain body temperature. We have to get rid of body heat. And the reason why we're pink is because our body is opening up the capillaries close to the skin so that we can get some nice warm blood up close to the skin where it can lose the heat out into the atmosphere. Now, the opposite happens when you're really cold, doesn't it? Doesn't your skin tends to take more on a whitish look? Your body is shutting down blood flow to the capillaries nearest the skin because we don't want to lose any body heat. Okay? We're trying to conserve body heat. But you could if we allow that to go too long and the temperature is below freezing, we're going to have what? Starts with an F. Frostbite. Okay? So we need blood flow close to the skin to prevent frostbite. Okay, so in this, of the ectotherms, we have some animals called the agnatha that fit into that category. Then we have the chondrichthyes. Now, chondra means like cartilage. Does anybody know what I think it's a Latin word called ichthus means? And the symbol for ichthus is like that. So guess what it means? What does that look like? Fish. Yeah, it looks like a fish. Okay, ichthus, that was a symbol that the early Christians used to indicate that they were Christians, with the fish symbol. So this means cartilage fish. The sharks have a whole body made out of cartilage. Okay, then we have osteichthyes. Oste means bone, literally bony fish. So if you ever go fishing, the fish you catch have bones in them. Okay? And we'll maybe try to properly flay them in such a way to minimize the number of bones that are in the flesh that I eat. But they have bones in them. Okay? Then we have amphibians. Give me an example of an amphibian. Amphibian means spends part of its life in water, part of its life is out of the water. It needs both parts. Like a frog, right? Like a frog. What would that be? Those are the reptiles. Give me an example of a reptile. Lizards, right? Would be, and historic creatures like dinosaurs and things like that fit into that particular one. Okay? So all of those that we've mentioned right here do not maintain a internal body temperature. They can't generate their own body heat. Now, in this one over here, we have the endotherm. They can generate body heat from within. The first group are the aves. What's that? Those are the birds. Okay? Have you ever heard of an aviary where they an enclosure where birds are allowed to kind of fly around inside? They have those, I'm sure, at the Henry Dorley Zoo. Mammalia. Give me an example of a mammalia. These give birth to their young alive. They feed their young with milk. They often have hair on their body. Cheetah would work. And we have some of those in this room. We're mammals, right? And what I described didn't also fit us too. Our young are born alive, not hatched. We feed the young with milk. We have body hair, maybe not as much as the cheetah or the bear, or you can name other animals that have a lot of hair. I saw a picture last night on the Can't remember where I saw it, but somebody was, I think it was up in Montana. I think it was Montana or North Dakota, but I think it was Montana. The sheep herders or ranchers had some animals that were killing their sheep, and one was a Canadian wolf, and the other one was an adult coyote, which you know what a coyote looks like because we have those around here. But the Canadian wolf it made the coyote look like it was just a miniature dog by comparison. I would say that they had it hung up by its back legs because they'd shot it, but I would say from the back legs to its front legs, the front legs would be on the ground, like about 8 feet long. So it makes almost any other dog look small. So those would be the ones that we're going to have in the endotherms. Okay. Now the vertebrates, those are the ones with a backbone, and we're going to show you that part. They have an endoskeleton. An endoskeleton. Our skeleton's on the inside. Some places it's pretty close to the surface, like in your skull. It's pretty close to the surface. Other places your skeleton's pretty far inside. Okay, now the axial skeleton is this part right here that's kind of yellowish color in this diagram. That's your axial skeleton. So it's made up of the skull. It's made up of all your, like what we call the spinal column. Also includes your ribs. And then for animals that have a tail, it includes a tail. We just have a tail bone. We have just a short little thing that folds up underneath our bottom. Okay? So that's your axial skeleton. And these vertebrae right here that make up your backbone, one interesting thing about it, I remember when I first learned it, where it actually was. If you look at me from front to back this way, how far from the back or how far from the front is the main part of my spinal column? You know, where the vertebrae are. Where is it located? Yeah, I always thought it was way here in the back because I can feel it in the back. But the axial vertebrae are halfway between the front and the back, which is logical. If you're going to support a body that has mass in front, it should have mass on the backside, right? To keep it from always wanting to tip one way or the other, you know, and put stress on your spinal column. So it's actually about halfway between my belly and my back, right in between, halfway in between. That's where the middle of my spine. So what I feel back here are these pieces that stick up from, or stick back from my spinal column. And that's where all the muscles are attached, so that when I bend over backwards or I'm on my belly and want to raise up like this, those muscles contract to make my body bend in that direction. Okay, now we have, this is the vertebral column that makes up the axial skeleton. We also have the skull that's part of that. We have names to these different parts of the vertebrae. The ones that are in the neck are called cervical vertebrae. The ones that make up, that have ribs attached to them, and if they have ribs attached, they're called the thoracic vertebrae, thorax, like your chest. And then these that are right here, like on this animal, or ours would be from the back of my lowest rib to my hips, are called the lumbar vertebrae. And they're the biggest because they're supporting the most weight. So all of those make up the axial skeleton. Then we have the appendicular skeleton. These are all my appendages, things that are connected to the axial skeleton, like my arms and my legs, or on this animal, it would be like their forelimbs, front legs, back legs would be part of that. Now, up here we have bones. On my back I have shoulder blades and other bones that make up that what we call the pectoral girdle. Those of you that are in weightlifting, anybody in here in weightlifting? What do we call these muscles right here? It doesn't have to be in weightlifting. Some of you already know what it is. They're called pectoralis major. So so we're using the same root for both of those, for pectoral girdle and pectoralis major. There's the big muscles that are like a fan shape over here that bring my arms forward like this. Okay? Then in the back we have the pelvic girdle. That makes up your hips. Okay? And the bones that attach the two together. That's called your pelvic girdle. Okay, so let's also talk about their circulatory system. When you look at this diagram, you would say that vertebrates have what kind of a circulatory system? There's one word you're looking for that gives me the clue as to what kind it is. You're going to say it's a closed circulatory system. It has arteries and veins. Over here, these are representing the arteries, and the veins are here diagrammed in blue. Do you have, at any point as the blood flows through your body, is it ever blue? Nope, our blood's always red, just different shades of red. And if you look at this, the blood that comes back from the body, systemic means the whole system, all our systems of our body, every parts of our body go back to the heart, and then in the heart, if the first place it goes is to the lungs. The first thing that your blood needs is more oxygen, because it's just come from all the other places in your body, given up its oxygen. It needs new resupply of oxygen. So the first thing it does is it goes through the lungs. Pulmonary means lungs. Okay? So the first thing it does is goes through the lungs. In the lungs, the vessels keep getting smaller and smaller and smaller until they're so tiny that only one red blood cell can go through single file. Okay? So the red blood cells are not going side by side. There's not enough room. They go through the capillaries one after the other, and then they start joining and getting bigger and bigger, and they'll end up going back to the heart on the other side of the heart, where it will be pumped out and go to the body again, okay, to carry the oxygen. So we have one heart that pumps blood to the lungs, the other half pumps it out to the rest of the body. And a ventral heart, our heart is up kind of on the front side of the body. And then the two halves are connected by blood vessels. The blood vessels are arteries, veins, and capillaries. Getting ready for you. Now, in the one thing that's common about the vertebrates is in the blood, not like the animals that we talked about up till now that did have blood in their circulatory system. Our blood has hemoglobin in it. It's a molecule that can carry oxygen. Does a good job. And here is a red blood cell with hemoglobin molecules on the inside, and they can quickly snatch up oxygen in the lungs. They'll snatch it up, and then when they get out to the other parts of the body by the cells, then the oxygen will move from an area of high concentration to an area of low concentration, and give up its oxygen to these cells. At the same time, it's also going to be picking up carbon dioxide. It's going to be picking up carbon dioxide to take back to the lungs. In the lungs, it wants to get rid of the carbon dioxide, but pick up new oxygen. So that hemoglobin is just a red, it's what makes our blood red. If you took out all the red blood cells, it would be pretty clear, well, kind of yellowish, kind of a yellowish color. Now, excretion in the vertebrates is carried out by the kidneys. What did we call what were the different names for organelle not organelle, that's the wrong word, for structures inside of a living thing that would filter out liquid waste? What were some of the names that we had? A lot of times they started with N. Like the earthworm had a pair in each segment. Nephridia, right? Neph, the N-E-P-H R, I think that much is probably the same. And if you look at what are the building blocks of a kidney, are called nephrons. So in the vertebrate, or in our kidneys, for instance, we have nephrons. Same word, does the same job, filters out liquid waste. We have two kidneys, a right kidney and a left kidney. You can donate one of those. But you would think anytime you have two of something in your body, there's probably it's necessary to have what we call redundancy. Redundancy means I have a backup system. Like for instance, a private plane has two electrical systems on the engine. We do not want that engine on takeoff to sputter and die. We have another electrical system, and we turn both of them on takeoff, because that's the most critical. If you lose power on takeoff, you're going down. Unless you've gotten plenty altitude and you can actually glide back to the airport, otherwise you're just going down, wherever it happens to be. And that's what happened to, Sully. You know, he was taken out of, I forget which airport off there on the East Coast, and ran into a flock of geese that knocked out all his engines, but he had enough altitude that he was able to land it. Remember in the Hudson River? There was a movie recently about that event. Two engines is definitely better than one. Quite often those jets that have two engines, actually on takeoff, if they lose one engine, may still be able to climb. Not very fast, but they'll still be able to climb. As long as you can climb, you're good. If you no longer can climb, you better be looking for a place to put it down. So we have two kidneys, and then the kidneys drain the liquid waste through two tubes that go to the bladder. And these two tubes, remember what do we call the liquid waste that our body produce? Starts with a U. Urine, right? So we use that first part the same. These are called ureters. And you have two of those, one from each kidney, and it goes into your bladder, and then your bladder stores it until you need to go to the bathroom, and then it empties out through a urethra, okay? And how long it is depends if you're male or female as to how long that tube is to the outside of your body. Now, how do vertebrates eat? Well, some of them we know are herbivores. What does that mean? What does that mean?
They only eat like vegetation.
Okay, they eat plants, right? Eat plants. What about carnivores? What do they eat? What do they eat? There we go. They eat meat. Usually other animals is obviously what they'll be eating. And what we mean by that is that's the main part of their diet, is meat. Herbivores, the main part of their diet is plants. Then we have some that are called omnivores. What does that mean? They'll eat both plants and animals. Bears, we always think of them as being carnivores, but technically they're omnivores. They eat berries and things like that too, in addition to meat of animals or fish or something like that. Okay, now when you look at the nutrition of an animal and how they process that food, you have, this would be like, we are omnivores. We can eat plants and animals. This would be like a rabbit, which only eats vegetation. And they have a lot of the same parts, as you can see that. They both have an esophagus, they both have a stomach, they both have a liver, they both have a pancreas, they both have a small intestine. But some of these also have some other structures because of what diet that God gave to them. Like this one has a cecum, which is common in animals that eat plants. Now, we have a short little, what's the word? Short little appendix, that's right between the intestine and the colon. Or this is the large intestine. Some animals have a little enlarging area that we just call a cecum for that, and then they all empty their waste, the solid waste, out through the anus. Okay, reproduction. All of these have external fertilization. Means that the sperm leaves the male and enters the female somehow. There are others that, like for external, would be maybe the female lays eggs and then the male immerses, like a seminal fluid, which would be, where the sperm is in over the top of it, and then they are fertilized outside the body. So in other words, the eggs are outside the female, the sperm is outside the female. Then we have some that are internal. That's kind of like humans do it. The egg stays inside the female, and the male deposits the sperm inside the female, and it's all stays inside all the time. Now, when it comes to how the young develop, we have oviparous, and that means egg. These are the animals that basically hatch from an egg. Then, and purus means to give birth, so that would mean an egg that hatches to give birth to an animal. Birds and reptiles do that, right? Birds lay eggs, reptiles lay eggs. Then we have viviparous, and vive means to be born alive. Okay? So, and these are nurtured within, like it says, within the mother. And that's where we fit. Okay? So when the egg is fertilized, it grows completely inside the mother's womb, right? Never leaves partway through or anything like that. You stay inside until you're ready to come out. And only you get to decide when you get to come out. That's why some women are overdue. In other words, they figured out when it's going to come out, but only the baby kind of decides when that time is when they're going to be ready to come out. Why don't you stand in the back? So otherwise I'm going to run out of water. Okay, now we have some others that are ovoviviparous. Okay, ovo meant what again? Egg, vive, born alive. So these give birth to their young alive. Now there's actually some animals that produce an egg, but instead of laying the egg actually hatches still while it's still inside of mom, and then comes out alive. So they're not nurtured directly by the mother. That would be this example. Snakes and reptiles and sharks do that. So even though it looks like a shark is giving birth to a baby shark alive, the shark mom actually produced an egg, but the egg stayed inside of mom instead of laying it, and then it hatching out. It stayed inside of mom, protected by mom, but not nurtured by mom. Okay? when you were inside your mom was constantly feeding you, right? With the umbilical cord, you heard of that? And you're constantly being fed by mom. Whereas this one, the egg stays inside but never receives any nourishment from mom. It's just protection. Kind of, mom hatches it internally before it comes out. Now, responses that these vertebrates have, different parts of the brain, okay, that we have. We have the olfactory lobes. Olfactory has to do with your nose, your sense of smell. Okay? Then you have a cerebrum. That's, for us, that's the main part of our brain, is our cerebrum. And it controls voluntary muscle activity. We can control our body, or like for a bird, controls its wings for flying or running on the ground. And then we have optic lobes. Those are the ones that process information coming from our eyes. And then we have a cerebellum, which is ours is right here on the back side, and all the nerve impulses that are supposed to go to a muscle, it coordinates it so that it goes at the right time. So you're not kind of spastic, that just your arms are flailing around like a baby does sometimes. At first it has no control over its motion. It moves but has no idea what's going on. And as you mature, you learn how to make your limbs move where you want it to move. The act of crawling is the process of figuring out how to make your limbs move so that you can actually get toward a toy or something like that. Okay? And then you have a medulla oblongata, and it transports, that's really low in your brain. It's almost like down there by the brain stem, or part of the brain stem. And it's the part that transports things from the brain into the spinal cord to go to where it needs to. Okay? Now, here are brains, for instance, of different kinds of animals. We have the bony fish, the amphibian, the reptile, the bird, and the mammal, and olfactory. Okay? Notice this is number one up there at the top. The sense of smell. Is the sense of smell important to a fish? Well, like for a salmon, to be able to make its way back to where it was hatched, it needs to have a really good sense of smell to get back there. So animals that have a really strong sense of smell are going to have that part of the brain large. Like a dog, for instance, is going to have that part pretty large, because smell is an important part of a dog's life. Okay? Cerebrum has to do with intelligence, and that's number 2. Okay? So fish don't have much intelligence, do they? You can't train a fish to jump or anything like that.